My question is, I'm new to this, so I approach people about revolution. I get different things come to me like, oh, we go through this all the time, whatever. Have you ever been in a point in your time, you've been doing this pretty much all your life, you dedicated your life to this. Um, my question is, have you ever been like discouraged at a time or feel like you had a roadblock, and what did you do to keep yourself going and motivated?
Yes. More than once. Look. You tear your hair out because this. All the things we're talking about, that we've been just talking about, work against what we're trying to do. The dominant media, the way people are conditioned. You go to a school to try to hook up with the youth and bring revolution to them, and the administrators come out. Many times they're black administrators who should, maybe you feel no better, and they start slandering you. It's like, it's really hard out there, okay? Because you're dealing with look, one of the things that we've had to work through is, we've talked about the upsurge of the 60s, right? Well, what happened? It didn't go where it needed to go. And because it didn't go all the way to revolution for the reasons that I, spoke to and we could get into more deeply, but, it just didn't. It didn't go where it needed to go. So then what you not only then are left with the same system, but you're left with a ruling class that's going to take revenge on everything that people fought for in that time. And they've been doing not only the concrete things, but the ideas, too, that came out. And they've been on a, and then in the world of that time, I talked about the Vietnam War. You had people fighting in all these third world countries against the colonialists, against the imperialists. You had China, which was a socialist country with 1/4 or 1/5 of the world's population, doing, making some mistakes, but doing tremendous things as the main thing going on. So, people were very inspired at that time. And, I've told a story before, but the first time that you want to stay standing? I'm going to talk.
I can see you better.
Yeah, okay. That's all right. If it's okay with you, it's okay with me. But no, it's fine. You can stay up. I just didn't want you to get tired, that's all. Yeah, okay, fine, that's good. But I was just saying, I've told this story before. The first time I met Huey Newton was, I went to this, a friend of mine told me about this cultural program, African American cultural program at a community college in Oakland. So I went there, and I was out in the hallway or whatever, and this guy came up to me. It turned out to be Huey Newton, and I think I was one of, at the most, 2 white people, who were attending this program. So he came up to me. I had a beard, and he came to me and he said, "Who are you, Socrates?" I guess he thought I looked philosophical or something, So I said no, and then he started asking me, "Are you with this group?" And I said no, and he said, "That's good. They're not revolutionary. Are you with that? Are you with that group?" No. I said no. That's good. They're not revolutionary. And then he started running down about how he saw the revolution, and he said, "Look, in the world, we got the third world. It makes up 2/3 or 3/4 of the population in the world. All those people are with us. If you just look inside of America," this is also, came from Malcolm X somewhat. "If you just look at inside America, we might be a minority, but if you look at the whole world, most of the world is with us, so that's why we can make a revolution here." Now, looking back on it, look, Huey Newton had a very positive influence on me, turning me toward revolution. But looking back on it, that was pretty naive. That's not the way you're going to be able to deal with this system, here, or even in the world as a whole. But that was like an idea that a lot of people gravitated toward. It's sort of, we had this idea that we were going in, things were going in a good direction. You're going more and more toward revolution. And it was just kind of grow and grow and grow, and more people were going to get with it. And eventually, somehow, this was going to turn the whole thing over. And, that didn't happen. You have to come up against the fact these people hold power. They have these powerful institutions and instruments of suppressing anybody who opposes them. They have the media, which we were just talking about, to manipulate people and to slander people, but they also have their ultimate power, the military and everything else. And so you're not going to just make a revolution by more and more people getting with it. And so then the world changes. China becomes no longer socialist. You got people who still call themselves communists, but they're just capitalists. That's what they're doing in China. So that's not a revolutionary country anymore. And the Vietnam War ended. The U.S. was defeated, but things didn't really go well in Vietnam. I want to go into all of it because it take too long. Yeah, exactly. So things were, so people got demoralized and disoriented. A lot of people who were with it because they had a naive notion of how this was all going to go. And so when you add on top of that the people who were the ones in power who'd been challenged in a very fundamental way during this upsurge of the 60s and early 70s, they weren't just going to take this. They went on a whole thing of revenge against all of the positive ideas, especially the radical ideas that came to the fore in that period of the 60s. They went on a whole thing about China and how terrible Mao was. And, it's like, if you play poker, you play poker and you say, okay, I'll bet 300, and somebody else put, okay, I'll see your 300 and raise it 500. Well, the intellectual hatchet men of this ruling class have done a similar thing with China. Mao killed 10 million people. I'll see your 10 million and raise it 20. Mao killed 30 million people. I'll see your 30 and raise it 15. Mao killed 45 million people. I mean, and just slander after slander after slander, and all this has an effect on people. And so you have to have a scientific approach to actually say, well, let's really look into this. I mean, we've done a lot of study of what actually happened in China, and also what happened in the Soviet Union, which was socialist for a while, even though they made a lot more mistakes because they were the first socialist country and they had a lot of difficulties, and they also had some wrong methods that led to some sometimes even grievous things that they did. But we've done a lot of work to look into what was the actual history of this. I looked at one time, I got a book in Barnes and Nobles. And I looked at it, I'm starting to read, and here it goes again. Mao killed 30 million people. So I said, okay, where's the footnote? I went to the footnote, and there's no primary source. It's just like a reference to another book. I went to the other book that it referenced, and there's just a reference to another book. There's never any primary, it's never anybody actually said, here's a study that shows this. And they do things like, when they add up the people that supposedly died during the Great Leap Forward in China, they count the people who were not born as if they were people who were killed. In other words, because there was some suffering then, some hardship, people had fewer children. So then those are counted as people who were killed by Mao, people who were never even born. No, this is the kind of stuff they do. They take revenge on this because for obvious reasons. Because this was a pole of a magnet of attraction for people all over the world. So this has worn on the revolutionaries, including in this country, including in our own party. And I found that discouraging. Not what the ruling class was doing, but the fact that even within our own party, people were starting to give up on revolution. That's why we had to have a cultural revolution in our party to say no. Let's go back to the science here. Can we solve these problems that we all say we hate under this system? Scientifically, let's look at it. Can we? No. If there have been difficulties in how we've tried to make revolution, let's look at those scientifically. Let's look at what actually happened. And then figure out, what lessons need to be drawn from that. That's the whole point of this new communism, is sifting through that experience as well as looking at broader human experience in different fields, and science and art and different things, and trying to, working to get a deeper understanding on the basis of scientifically going back to basics and saying, well, were we wrong? Can you really reform the system and make it okay for people? Not just here, but around the world. No. If you look at it scientifically, you get an even deeper understanding that you cannot do that. You need a revolution. So, yes, some of this is very discouraging. It's discouraging that we have, that these great upsurge didn't lead to the revolution that it should have led to, or at least it should have attempted to go to. It's discouraging that the ruling class has been able to take such revenge on everything positive that came out of that whole period. It's discouraging that even communists who should have known better got influenced by that and started thinking, well, maybe, this democracy is the best that people can do and blah, blah, blah. Those things are discouraging, but you have to go back to the basics. What is the problem that humanity faces, and what is the solution to that, and how do we scientifically determine that? And if you do that, you will see that the problem is this system we live under. There are other forces out there in the world who are no good, but the fundamental problem, which sort of takes in all of this, is the system we live under, and the solution is to overthrow the system and to bring into being a socialist system and ultimately a communist world without all this stuff. And, it's not going to be utopia. Everything's not going to be perfect. There's still going to be conflicts, not violent conflicts, but, differences among people, struggles among people. But that is the fundamental, if you go to it scientifically, that is the fundamental problem, and that is the fundamental solution. So we have to go to work even harder and with more determination and with more scientific approach, even though much of that is discouraging. I feel like I imagine almost all of you do. I can't stand living in this goddamn place, this country, this world. Every day there's something else that you just want to, smash something. You just want to smash something, but what do? You could smash something, but then after you've done that, things are still the same. So you got to really go to work on this scientifically to figure out how can we actually do this. And the reason that discouragement or not, the reason you fight through the discouragement and don't give up is because you keep coming back to the problem and solution. And if I didn't think there was a solution, if I really had to come to the conclusion that there was no way that anything better could be brought into being, then I suppose I would give up. I probably would break a bunch of things, But I scientifically am convinced that there is a solution, hard as it is, and that we have to go to work on it even harder ourselves.